Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Truth Will Set You Free. This show is brought to you by TLBTV and the Liberty Beacon Project. I'm your host, Linda Diane Wattley, and we have a very special guest today. I am so honored to have Jeff Rasley. It's Rasley, right? Rasley on our show today.
Long A, Rasley.
Rasley. Okay, Rasley. Jeff Rasley. I am so honored to have him on the show is because I always admire people who give so much of themselves to make a difference in this world. And what I like about Jeff is he don't just do it in his own country. He travels the world, making a difference in other people's lives. He is a speaker, a workshop leader. He helps people who like to write memoirs. He is a person who has been interviewed, has done over 70 podcasts, radio shows, you name it, he's done it. And he has covered topics and articles ranging from sports, romance. I was surprised to see romance on that list. You're going to have to talk to me about that. And he talks about being a philanthropologist. How do you pronounce that word?
Philanthropist?
Yes. It just kind of twists my mouth a little bit, but I respect what that is. That's why I didn't want to give up not mentioning it. He likes to travel. He likes crafts. He's actually done scuba diving. He's traveled across the United States. He's always wanted to contribute to people's lives, even when he was in high school. He has done things to help people to get to a better place in life. He had started a March for Hunger. I mean, at such a young age, I was like, wow. And then when he go to college, he helped renters get their rights and things that they need. And then he's in Indianapolis, and he lives on the White River. And it was a chemical spill of some kind that had polluted their water, and he led to make sure that was correct. And I'm quite sure people in Indianapolis appreciate him too. So he's always giving. And I just find him interesting. He has tracked Himalayas. He has been to Basa Village, which I really want him to share with you what he gives there. It's just phenomenal. And he is a very patient man. I've had some difficulties, and he has been patient with me, and we have worked through it. And here we are today, and I'm just excited to share with you a man that gives his life for humanity. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. Thank you, Linda. Good to be with you.
Yes. And that word I couldn't pronounce. Tell me something about that.
Well, philanthropy, the English word, comes from a combination of two ancient Greek words, which are philos, which means love, and anthropos, which means humanity. So it means love of humanity.
That is definitely you. I mean, it's just so amazing. How do you become a person that cares that much about humanity?
Well, you've tooted my horn very nicely. In fact, I'm wondering if my mother wrote that script for you. But, I think it's a matter, largely a matter of upbringing and culture. You know, if you're brought up by parents who teach you that you shouldn't be selfish, you should be considerate of others. And if you have teachers that give you that same message, and maybe in a church or some kind of religious setting where you're taught the golden rule and loving others as yourself, as the great Christian commandment, and also just growing up in a culture which recognizes and appreciate people who act philanthropically, and I did. I mean, my parents emphasized that. Many of my teachers did. I grew up in the church, and I certainly got that message in the church I grew up in too.
And I also know that you're good at getting things done for large groups of people, not just for yourself. The nonprofit organizations. You had a very powerful moment today. Share with us what happened for you today.
Oh, thanks. I was elected the president of an organization here in Indianapolis called the Indianapolis Science Tech Club. And it's an educational club for older adults. Most of the members are retired. In fact, about a third or more are retired doctors, and another third are retired engineers. And then there's kind of a miscellaneous third, which as a retired lawyer, I fit into. But the club has a foundation, and every year we give away about $250,000 in educational grants. Some scholarships, but mostly to programs that need funding that school systems or universities don't provide. So, for example, for the last 3 years, we funded a summer institute for high school teachers, primarily science and math teachers, so that we actually pay them to go through a week of additional training where they work on the content of their particular discipline, and that's in the morning, and then in the afternoon they work on teaching method. And we have experts that we bring in and pay to lead those workshops, and then the teachers get an hour of continuing education credit for that. And the thing that's interesting about that is if you talk to teachers, they'll tell you that they can get paid extra for coaching, for running clubs, that sort of thing, but to actually improve themselves as teachers, to take continuing education classes, they have to pay for it themselves, and they have to work it into their own schedule and so forth. So we thought what would be a great idea is to set up that kind of training, pay for it, and actually pay teachers a stipend to come and go through it. And we started out 3 years ago with just a handful, about 15 teachers involved, and last summer it was up to 72. And Ball State University is now partnering with us, and we hope to continue to increase that.
And what did you call this organization?
It's called the Scientech. It's science and then tech. And it's called that because what the education that it promotes is primarily science education. And it was actually started 100 years ago. This coming year, 2018, is our 100th anniversary. And it was started by some locally very prominent people, like Eli Lilly, the founder of Lilly Company, the big pharmaceutical company, was a founding member. Elwood Hayes, the guy who invented the first gasoline-driven automobile, was an early member. And so it's a great organization because every week it has an educational program for members, and then we do this this grant. The foundation gives all these grants to promote education, and mostly in science and math. So that's the mission of the club.
That is awesome. And see, that's what you do here in the United States, but you have a big task over in Basa Village. Share with us that experience, because you are able to develop these nonprofit organizations and get things done. And the progress there, because of your desire to make a difference there, is phenomenal.
Well, thanks. Well, I started going to the Himalayas to do trekking and mountaineering expeditions back in the mid-90s. And I really fell in love with the mountains. Here in Indiana, we don't have mountains. So this was not something I grew up with at all. But I had turned 40 and was kind of manifesting midlife crisis symptoms. And so my wife decided that a cure for that would be that I should go take a hike. So I came home from the office one day and she slapped a brochure about hiking in the Himalayas down on the table in front of me and said, "Why don't you go do this?" So I agreed that sounded like a good therapeutic response to a turning 40 crisis, and went over and hiked the Mount Everest Base Camp Trail. Just loved the experience. And so I started going back almost every year, learned how to do mountain climbing. But Nepal, where I had gone most of those expeditions, is a very poor country. It's the poorest country in the world, with several exceptions in Africa, but it's the poorest country in Asia. And so when I would go back, I would try to do some little fundraising effort, and eventually that turned into starting a foundation focused on this one village. And I focused on this one village, which is called Basa, because I had gotten to know a bunch of the villagers, because they had worked as guides and porters and cooks for the expedition groups I was leading. And they told me that they had a little village school that had 3 grades, and they wanted to add a 4th and a 5th grade. And that for $5,000, they could buy the materials needed to add the 2 classrooms and to pay 2 teachers for 3 years, which seemed like an incredibly small amount of money to do all that. But the guy whose name is Niru Rai, who owned the expedition company I was using, he and I had become friends, and I trusted him, and he had donated the land within the village for the school. And so I knew there was a real commitment there. And so we agreed that I would raise the money. He would make sure it was spent properly, and the villagers would do all the construction work themselves. And they would hire as teachers 2 young women who had gone to college in Kathmandu, and they would be the 4th and 5th grade teachers. And so we did that, and it worked out. And then I visited the village and had just an amazing, wonderful experience, because it's not on a trekking trail. I mean, outsiders don't go to this village. When I went with just a few other folks, we were the first group of outsiders, people who didn't live in the area, that had ever visited the village. And it was an amazing experience. They literally covered us in flowers when we arrived. And every home wanted us to come and visit their home and sit around their campfires and drink their local brew and eat the food cooked by their mamas and grandmas. And so I just kind of fell in love with this little village. And then Niru and I started talking about what else we could do. They had no running water, no electricity. There were no vehicles in this village. They did all their farming, and that's all the villagers were farmers. They did all their farming by hand or by water buffalo. No power tools at all. Everything that comes to the village is carried on the back of a human being or a pack animal. And so it was basically like how sort of the rest of us would have lived, 500 years ago, before any modern sort of technologies at all. So we started talking to the village about how would they like to improve their situation. And of course, education was their first concern. They wanted their kids to have a modern education. And then the next thing is they wanted to have electricity. So I created a foundation and brought other friends in, and we raised the money and donated it. And then the villagers built their own little hydroelectric plant. And then we did the same thing with a water system, and then stoves, because they were all heating and cooking over open fires. So they now have stoves that pipe the smoke out of their homes, and so that's what we've done. Just about every year or two, we've added one more project, and our goal is to create a model for doing philanthropy, that kind of philanthropy, what we call culturally sensitive development in other villages throughout the area. So,
Wow.
long answer to your question.
Wow, but you also said that they don't have half as much as we have, not even a fourth of what we have in the United States, but yet they seem to be more happier than we are.
That's true. The average income in Nepal for the entire nation is about $2 per day. And in Basa Village, most of the villagers don't have any money. They grow the food that they eat, and the only real outside income they have is when they work for Neeru's company as porters or guides or cooks. Of course, they're paid for that, and they get tips for doing that. But there are no stores in Basa. If you have money, there's nowhere to spend it. So
Wow.
if there's a market village about an hour and a half to 2 hours walking from Basa, so they can take their crops and trade at the market village, or the guys that have worked for Adventure GeoTreks, and they have some money, they can go and they can buy things at the market village. But in that area of Nepal, most of the economy is still barter. They grow their food in the village. They have tailors that make all the clothing. They have blacksmiths that fashion the tools, but they just have hand tools. They don't have any power tools. And it's, like I said, it's like the way, Europe, let's say, Europeans would have lived 500 to 1,000 years ago.
You also said they're not competitive like we are here in the United States.
Yeah, very true. Their culture is very much based on cooperation. And an example that I like to tell of that is I taught the kids one time I was there how to play tic-tac-toe. So we were drawing in the dirt the little X's and O's and to play tic-tac-toe, and I was winning every game. And the reason is because if you know how to play tic-tac-toe and you get your X's and your O's on opposite sides, and your opponent doesn't block you, then you'll win. If the opponent blocks you, then it's a standoff and nobody wins. And so after doing this for a few times, I showed the kids what I was doing so they could see my strategy. So we start playing again, and the same thing happens. They would, every time, they would just make their X's and O's in either a straight line or a diagonal line, but they weren't trying to beat me. So eventually I realized, like, they don't care about winning. That just wasn't in a concept for them. What they wanted to do is just play the game and have fun. They love to play volleyball and soccer, but they don't have goals. They don't have a net. All they do is and they actually didn't even have balls, but we've brought some to the village. But what they did is they would take leaves and they would wrap the leaves and tie them with string, and that was their ball. And they would kick that around and they'd knock it around like they're playing soccer or volleyball, but they don't keep score. They don't even have a way of making a goal or making a point. And they don't care. I mean, that's how, because it's all a matter of just working together to play, and that's how the village works. When the village has a decision to make, they call everybody who lives there together, and they just talk through whatever the decision is that they need to make. Anybody can stand up and talk. It is true total democracy. And I got to witness this because I was there when they called their village meetings to discuss the water project. And they worked out who was going to do what in terms of the construction, who was going to be in charge of making the food to feed the people working on the construction, and men and women together, all working, who is going to be then in charge of maintaining and running it. They chose 2 guys to become the techs, to get to learn how to operate the little hydroelectric plant. They chose a utility board to be in charge of it. And they've done the same thing with the school and with the water project.
Wow. Seems like you really like it there.
Yeah, I do.
I'm surprised you came back here.
Well, I was actually just there a few weeks ago, and once again had just an amazing time. There are 15 of us that went, 15 Americans who were either already involved with the foundation or just wanted to go trekking in Nepal and thought it would be neat to visit Basa Village because they'd read books that I've written about it. And once again, we were literally covered with flowers when we arrived, and there was drinking, dancing. All the school kids performed dances and songs for us. And the kids all have new school uniforms, which the foundation provided. And it was a delightful, wonderful time.
And you know, another thing I like that you share with everyone is your writing talent. You not only have written 10 books, but you also help other people to prepare their work. How did you get so interested in writing?
Well, I grew up in a family of journalists. My step-grandfather was the editor of the local paper, who was succeeded by my stepfather as editor. My mother was a reporter, and she became city editor. So, many of the adults in my family lived in that world. And then I married a writer and an English professor. And I've always liked to write. And so there's this organization here in Indianapolis called the Indiana Writers Center. And its mission is to help writers at all levels. But most of the people that take classes and courses and workshops through the Writers Center are fairly new at it. And so they asked me to start leading classes years ago. And so for a number of years, I've mostly focused on memoir writing and helping people who want to write their own memoir on how to do that and, what not to do. For example, your diary is not a publishable memoir unless you're a super famous celebrity, then you can publish anything. But if you're not, you need to do more than just take your diary and try to put it up on Amazon. So
this that you share with everybody, is that from that publishing company you work with, the Sumner Publishing?
Yeah.
Or is that separate?
Midsummer Books.
Yeah, Midsummer, I'm sorry.
It's actually our family company. And my wife had 20 some books published by other major publishers, and I'd had a couple, and we decided we really would like to control our own publishing. And
that's a good idea.
I mean, there's some great things to work with a traditional publisher, but there's a lot of downside to it as well. Like, for one thing, the time. I mean, you finish a book, if you're lucky enough to get a literary contract, it'll probably be 2 years before that book is actually available to be bought and read by other people. And the publishers control all kinds of things that, you know, novice writers don't realize. Like, my wife had a pen name that she used for her first two books, and then she transferred to a different publisher, and the first publisher owned the pen name. I mean, we didn't realize that. But so she, you know, she was developing a following of readers, and her third book had to be under a different pen name. So the fourth one, she just used her own name, and she's used her own name since then. But that's an example that my first book about Basa Village, the publisher wouldn't use the title that I had. They came up with a completely different title that their marketing department decided on. And I'm the author, but I didn't get to decide the title of my own book. So now, you know, we control the whole process, start to finish.
So you're saying people can submit manuscripts to you?
Well, what we do from other folks is we will help them create a publishable manuscript. But so far, we haven't let anybody else use our Midwest or midsummer books.
I understand that too, because it can get complicated on both ends.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot to that. People don't even realize the dynamics of, you know, the easy part is the manuscript.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the, I mean, if you're a real writer, I mean, that's the best part. It's the writing. It's all the hassles that go after that. But so we've helped quite a few people get their books published. But so far we just want to keep the publishing company.
I think that's a good idea. Trust me, because I'm an author also, and what you're saying, you're right on point. As a matter of fact, your one book that we're going to talk about is Polarize the Case for Civility in the Time of Trump.
That's my last book, yes.
Tell us how you came up with that title.
Well, so Donald Trump was elected president, and this was possibly the most contentious presidential election since the Civil War. I mean, you could certainly, during the civil rights era, there was a lot of contention within the country, but in terms of focusing on the presidential candidates and the polarization of the country, the kind of the animosity from one side to the other, it's definitely not been this angry, at least since 1968. And I mean, I had friends who wouldn't go home for Thanksgiving because they couldn't stand to be in the same room with a family member who voted the other way than they did. In this last summer, so 6 months after Trump was inaugurated president, I'm on this running trail, and I see a friend of mine who I haven't talked to for a while standing beside the trail, just kind of gazing off into the distance. And I said, "Hey, Bill, what's going on? How you doing?" And he just shakes his head. And he said, "I just can't accept it." So you can't accept what? He said, "I can't accept Donald Trump being president. I'm thinking about leaving the country." This is 6 months after inauguration.
Wow.
There's a person in my neighborhood who every week puts a sign on her trash can when it's trash pickup day that says, "Resist, not my president." So here, it's a year later, she's still putting the sign on her trash can. And that, I went to all across the country, the day after inauguration was the Women's March. Tens of thousands of people turned out across the country. In Indianapolis, the crowd was estimated at 8,000 to 10,000 people. And Hoosiers, we're not big on demonstrating. The only thing we get really riled up about is basketball. So to get 10,000 Hoosiers to go to a political rally and it was called the Women's March. It really was. It was an anti-Trump rally.
Oh no!
the women's marches all across the country the day after the inauguration, they were all anti-Trump rallies. So it just struck me that this is not the way things normally work. Normally, we get a new president. If you didn't vote for that candidate, you're upset, you're sad, you know, country made a mistake, but you get over it. And the two parties start trying to work together. That has ended. When Mitch McConnell said the Republican strategy in Congress will be to block everything President Obama tries to do, that sent a message to the country, and that has resonated and has rippled to the point that not only is each party now guilty of that, because the Democrats are now pretty much trying to block most everything Trump does, you know, tit for tat, is we've gotten to a point where Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives won't even talk to each other. And and my book goes into how this has happened, why it's happened, the various factors, and but we are at a point in our country of hyper-polarization that is unhealthy and dangerous. And so I thought, I'm one person, not a lot I can do about it, but I'm going to try something. And so what I did is I tried an experiment on Facebook where I invited people of different political perspectives. And at this point, I started this last February, so a month after the inauguration. I invited people, and so pro-Trump, anti-Trump, and that was really my intention, was to get pro-Trump and anti-Trump people to participate in this. I started posting a series of topics, of hot button kind of issues, like everything from U.S. involvement in Syria to whether Jeff Sessions should have been, whether he should have been sworn in as Attorney General, to has there been collusion with the Russians, what should the relations between Russia and the U.S. to be, even abortion was one of the topics. And my only rule was that participants in the discussion could not attack each other personally. They could criticize what others said. They could criticize and attack political figures or political parties. But what I ask people to do is express your point of view and support it with facts and evidence and reason. And at the time when I started this, I had 650 Facebook friends. 62 people participated. And the official experiment lasted 2 months, so 8 different topics. 62 people participated in those discussions. And for the most part, it was a success. And what it proved was that when there's just a commitment to, we're going to treat each other as adults, we're going to engage in civil conversation, we're not going to yell and scream, and we're just going to talk about difficult issues. See what we can agree to, see what we don't agree to, but the main point was just try to understand people on the other side. You know, why do you want to have a wall built? Why do you think we shouldn't have a wall built? You know, just try to reach a better understanding of where we are, and maybe that will be the first step in reducing this angry polarization that we have. So that was my point, and I ended the official experiment after 8 weeks, but I kind of continued it off and on, and eventually about 85 people were participating. I haven't posted for a while because I was busy going to Nepal and doing other things. But I thought, you know, this is actually, there's a positive message here. And so I wanted to write a book about sort of how we've gotten to this point, and then to describe my little experiment and how this could be a model, not only on Facebook, but in other social media, and also just in our own personal relationships. That we can all go home at Thanksgiving, and even if old Uncle Al is a crazy Trump supporter, and little Minnie is a radical, liberal, progressive, anti-Trump person, if they just agree not to insult each other, not make fun of each other, but just talk, they'll at least understand each other, and they can go back to eating turkey together.
So did they actually have an interest there, or did they use it as a place to vent?
Yeah, some people, well, first of all, some people responded to my invitation with, hell no. There is no way do I even want to talk to somebody who voted for Trump. I don't want to have anything to do with them, which was very interesting, because about 15 of my Facebook friends, that was their response. No pro-Trump supporter responded by saying, I refuse to engage with somebody who voted for Clinton. But a whole lot of people on both sides, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, pro-Clinton, anti-Trump, or anti-Clinton, said, yeah, we want to try it. And so I went ahead with it. And some people, yes, used it to vent, but they did follow the rule of not attacking other people personally. There were some very nasty things said about Trump, and very nasty things said about Clinton and her husband. But they didn't, the participants stuck with my rule of civility of don't attack each other, which I thought was really interesting, because maybe that's just what we need to remind each other of when we start feeling that anger welling up, that, okay, I'm upset about this issue because I'm passionate about it, but even if you disagree with me, I'm not going to be angry at you. You know, you're not the one who's building that wall. If I don't think a wall should be built, you know, it's President Trump. So I'll direct my anger at President Trump, but not at you, just because you support President Trump. And if we can, you know, bring down that hostility among our fellow citizens, I think at the very least we can have political campaigns based more on facts and evidence and rationality than just emotion. And
Well, how did you feel about Alabama's outcome?
Well, I was delighted with the outcome. And I think Doug Jones did an admirable job at trying to stay on the issues. You know, if you notice, he really did not attack more on a personal basis, and he certainly had the ammunition that he could have. Now, a lot of his supporters did, and outside people, you know, made attacks, and probably warranted, against Roy Moore. But I thought one of the wonderful things about how that turned out is the guy that won really stayed on topic, didn't turn it into this nasty, ugly, personal attack, and he won. Now, there are some disturbing statistics, though, that 69% of white voters voted for Roy Moore. I find that it's kind of discouraging, because to me, in my view, Roy Moore, like so many people said, was unfit. You know, was unfit to serve. even if you didn't believe the allegations against his sexual misconduct, statements he made like homosexuality should be criminal. You know, he still thinks that that's a criminal offense. He made anti-Semitic comments. He said that, you know, when America was greatest was before the Civil War, you know, during slavery. I mean, just anybody who has those opinions, I don't think any state would want in serving as their senator. And so that 69% of the white voters in Alabama were willing to send that guy to Washington. It's disappointing, but he's not going.
So would you say, what was different about Alabama and Virginia, how they won?
Well, yeah, I mean, Virginia, the Democrat candidate won. And I think Democrats, and I am not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican either. I try to vote for who I think is the best candidate. But Trump has been such a polarizing character, and the way he ran his campaign was so polarizing that I think one of the effects of that is going to be that he's going to, over time, the people who are not attracted to his truly ugly aspects of his campaign and his behavior and his demeanor and his tweets, I think his base of supporters is going to shrink and shrink and shrink. And I think the Democrats are going to have a much easier time in the next congressional election, and if he runs again, in running against him. Maybe I'm just being hopeful, but I would say the Virginia and the Alabama elections would indicate there's good reason for hope. Plus his shrinking poll numbers. He's down to what, 32%? I think is the latest poll.
That's what I saw also.
Yeah, of people who still support him. I mean, it's a historical low. So, you know, and I don't think everything he's done as president is bad. I think he's done a few things that are actually make sense. But just his character, his tweeting, you know, the things just the way he behaves, it not only is it not presidential, it's not good character. As my mother would say, it's not proper breeding. I mean, he's just, you know, an unpleasant, offensive person. And contrast that with Barack Obama. Whatever you thought about his political positions, maybe you disagreed with them, he was a gentleman. He was a good husband. He was a good father. He was a good human being. Now, if the Republicans can come up with a conservative candidate who supports the Republican platform, who is a good human being, they don't have to nominate somebody who has the ugliness that Donald Trump brings into politics. And we were polarized before, but Donald Trump has increased our polarization. I mean, he's magnified it tremendously. And I hope we've reached a tipping point and more people will recognize that and decide that isn't the politics that we want.
Well, you have to tell me also, after being a nonprofit organizer in Basa Village, and then you wrote this book, how do you come to an article about romance?
Well, two books that I've written have romance as part of the plots. So I am not a romance writer, really. My wife is. That's the genre that she's written most of her books in are romances. But two books I did write have romances, and one was based on a legal case I had years ago. It's in the genre of legal thriller, but there is a romance that's, I think, pretty hot in that one. And then another book I wrote was based on my experience of playing on a college football team that went for 3 years without winning a game. And it's, in fact, People magazine called our team the worst team in college ball. And so the book is sort of a comedy about what it was like playing on a team that lousy. And it's also kind of an uplifting coming of age story about a young man who is fictional because he's a lot better football player than I was, how he grows up. And he has a girlfriend, and they have a kind of a rough go because she's a sort of a hippie radical feminist and he's a farm boy jock. And that's the romance of how those two can get together and fall in love and live happily ever after.
So you have a lot going on. So on a normal, what do you basically focus in on a daily basis?
Well, I'm on the board of 5 different nonprofits, so there's usually something to do. And if I'm working on a book or an article, a writing project, then I've got that to do. And if I'm going to be teaching a class, there's that to prepare for. So, and I work out every single day, 7 days a week, because if you're gonna trek or climb over in the Himalayas, and especially if you're gonna be the group leader, you need to be physically fit. And plus I've played sports all my life and I'm kind of addicted to exercise. So that's a chunk out of every day for me.
So is trekking the same as saying hiking? What's the difference?
Yeah, what trekking is it's hiking, but on a trip. So basically, it's doing a trip by walking. And in the Himalayas, British aristocrats 100 years ago developed a style that has become trekking. And these British aristocrats wanted to go over to the highest mountains in the world and, tally ho, have a great adventure, but they were aristocrats. So they didn't cook their own food. They didn't carry their own tents and all the heavy stuff that goes with that. So they hired local people to be the porters and the cooks and the guides. And so Himalayan trekking, you go over and you carry a light pack and you walk and take photos at your own pace. And the local trekking company will take care of the tents and the cooking and the guiding. And so basically they do take care of all the work other than you putting one foot in front of the next and taking lots of photos and chit-chatting along the way. But because we're at least a part of the time at fairly high altitude, just walking is harder than normal. And you're on a mountain trail, so you're going up and you're going down, and you're not walking on a flat surface or in a straight line. So even though the guys in the crew are carrying the heavy stuff, just getting up the mountain is quite a chore.
Wow. So all these different things you have to offer people, because there's a lot there between writing, trekking, you speaking engagements, showing up on broadcasts and podcasts and articles, and I mean, you just like so available. How do people get in touch with you?
Well, I have a website. It's my full name, Jeffrey Rasley, JeffreyRasley.com. So they can get in touch with me through the website. I have an author page on Amazon. They can get in touch with me through the Amazon author page. And my email is on those two sites. So happy to get email from people that want to communicate.
Yeah, you have an awesome website because you can spend a lot of time there just clicking on any link that you have there.
Well,
It's
thanks.
really nice. You did a good job with that website. I mean, you just, to me, is an amazing person because you offer so many unique things that tracking, for instance, and what you do in Basa, it's just phenomenal. And you went scuba diving.
Yeah, I haven't for a while, but yeah, I've dived on islands all over the Caribbean and in the South Pacific, and also kayaking. I used to do a lot of sea kayaking adventures, which were mostly on my own, where I would go off and paddle from one island to another and pitch my tent, which is a wonderful, delightful experience, just so long as you didn't get lost out on the ocean.
So out of all of your adventures, which one is your heart?
Well, probably trekking in Nepal. Climbing has gotten, the older I've gotten, the harder it's become. In fact, this last time I had planned to climb a mountain and I had a sprained ankle, and so I couldn't. And when I talked to my buddies who came down off the mountain and I heard about their pain and suffering, thank you, ankle.
Yeah.
I'm glad I was just limited to the hiking. But yeah, I mean, my heart has really been touched by my experiences in Nepal. And it's as much the people as the mountains. The mountains are spectacularly beautiful, but in the villages, the people are just kind. Sir Edmund Hillary called the Sherpa people the kindest and the strongest people in the world.
Wow.
That's because the people that live up in the mountains are incredibly tough. They endure hardship with a smile, and yet they're just kind and sweet. And I love being with them.
And they live their life to the fullest. You also said that they tend to don't have a long lifespan.
Yeah, their lives are very hard. Working in the fields all day, and then those who work as porters, carrying those heavy loads up in high altitudes. It's a hard life. And so even though they may be happier than we are and live a much simpler and more contented life, it's physically a hard life, and especially in the remote places where they don't have any access to modern medicine. Their lifespan just isn't anywhere near as long as ours is, where we sit comfortably on our derrieres with HVACs, keeping us warm in the winter and cool in the summer. They don't have that.
But they're happy. That's what I gather from that. So the time span really is kind of irrelevant in some ways.
Well, a big reason that they have this high level of happiness, in fact, that my friends over there joke, they say, in America, you have tall people, short mountains, big GDP, and in Nepal, we have short people, tall mountains, and big HDP, happiness quotient. So we have lots of money and things. They have a lot of happiness. And their lives are much simpler. They don't have this driving ambition to get more and more and more stuff because there's no stuff to get. So they farm their fields, they are with their family and their friends, they look out at the most spectacular scenery in the world, and they make art out of flowers. Every home in Basa has a flower garden, even though, you know, the soil is so valuable because that's their livelihood. They care enough about beauty that they will set aside part of their land for flower garden.
Well, it seemed like to me you would be somewhat in a Twilight Zone because you are living several realities.
Well, in the group that I was just with over in Nepal, several of the people said, this is like Shangri-La. We think when we leave it's going to disappear. It's just so lovely and so peaceful. And then we come back to, well, or even there, you go to Kathmandu, a big modern city with pollution and traffic and busyness, and it feels like a different reality.
Well, Jeff, you are on the Truth Will Set You Free show. Give us some truth to remember you by.
Well, thank you, Linda, and it's been great talking to you. Actually, for the second time, since our first time I got erased. Yeah, it's been wonderful being on The Truth Will Set You Free. And I guess the truth I would like to promote, which is based on my last book about our polarized situation, is the way we can better understand each other and do our little bit to make our reality more peaceful and harmonious is to just not attack each other, be kind, be civil, and we'll have a better and a more peaceful world.
Wonderful. And the thing about it, you know, the more that I spend time with you, I realize you are really a spiritual person.
So it's been said.
Yes. And it's beautiful. It's calming.
Well, you know, in Nepal, the way we say hello and goodbye is namaste. And what that means is, I see God in you. And whether we believe in God or not, there is a spirit that as human beings we all share.
Well, thank you for sharing yours with us today. It's something that I will keep.
Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing yours with me, Linda.
Thank you for your patience.
It's all right. It was worth it.
Yes. And you have to come back because I know you're going to have new adventures.
I hope so.
So you stay in touch, okay?
Okay, Linda.
Take care.
You take care too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.